already thanked Ken and Rosemary, but he was kind enough to speak with his colleagues. I'd like to also thank Lynn and the Jim Personers of ITEN for funding and hosting this event. And second, this is an effort to return our research ideas to all of you that who have generously given your time in the past year, so thank you very much. And third, we believe we have some messages skimmed out of this paper. But today there is something more important, the panel discussion by key entrepreneurship supporters. And the panel will open up and take questions from you. So, the whole conversation about what is the state of the ecosystem in St. Louis and what is the next step is something I hope that we can start talking about it this evening. So in this sense, this presentation is only an opener and curtain raiser. Talking about the local ecosystem of entrepreneurship. And we know that entrepreneurship is largely a local phenomenon. But this ecosystem has clearly become one of the buzzwords in the last 3 or 4 years. And everyone uses it, sometimes misuses it, quite often abuses it in so many different ways. And as a result, it's not very clear what it really means. But let me clarify here that the purpose of this presentation is not to come up with a stereo definition of ecosystem. And I don't think this definitional game is the most constructive analytical exercise. And I'd like to spend another minute talking about it later. But there are other dimensions and issues about the ecosystem that we need to be discussing and learning from. And when people talk about this ecosystem, people often ask questions something like this. What is the next Silicon Valley? Can my city be the next Silicon Valley? Answer is often no. But that's one of the very typical questions. Another typical question is, does my city have all the elements of the ecosystem? And there are 365 metro areas in the US, and except just a few, like Silicon Valley, Boston, Austin, Boulder, a few other places, most places usually come up with this usual suspect. Well, my region doesn't have finance and power. Are they the most important questions to be asking? And what are the academic studies on this ecosystem debating? And do they help much? And in our view, not so much. And despite this importance of the local ecosystem, they're having only a handful of academic studies. And I'm listing, probably almost all of them here. And there are some different versions of it, but they all tend to investigate which elements are essential in the ecosystem. And those, typical, those elements are like, entrepreneurs and spin-off companies, talent or skilled labor, a university, especially research university, capital, and incubators for customers, and some kind of social capital or culture to support entrepreneurship. So this is the diagram made by the Dan Eisenberg of the Berkeley, and I don't mean to pigeonhole him, and he's a good friend of mine. But it kind of often looks like this. These are the elements, and if you have all the elements, it kind of looks like a system, and it will going to be functioning in your local area. But I'd like to pose the questions. The biggest issue is homogeneity versus heterogeneity. If you are asking, in this debate of the ecosystem, what is the ecosystem, and trying to define it, you are actually assuming that the local ecosystem of entrepreneurship homogeneous. Even in the different regions, they should be kind of looking the same. But should all ecosystems look alike? Probably no, if we ask. And does every ecosystem have to have all those elements? And do we have to come up with a very systematic definition of ecosystem? And second, most of the ecosystem theory is developed from a very selected place, most namely Silicon Valley. And it's indicating that we develop Silicon Valley system good for Europe. And keep in mind that Silicon Valley, if you go back to the history of it, they have decades of experiments and failures and some advancement. So that's like going back to the almost like World War II. And just looking at the Silicon Valley now, 2010 is the best thing for you. And the last question: if all the elements that these studies have suggested, does the ecosystem really function? And let's deconstruct some of the elements, starting from the most popularly discussed one, finance. If you talk to entrepreneurs, this is probably the number one issue raised in almost every place. But not too much. Well, many entrepreneurs complain that it's very hard to have entrepreneurship in my region because my region lacks finance, especially the venture capital industry. That's not happening. Not too much is known, but we published this report 2 years ago, and it's actually really shaken the venture capital. That we have, as the Coulson Foundation with a $2 billion assets, we have invested quite a few places, including venture capital. And we have invested about 100 of them in the past 20 years, and looked at the portfolio. The result was surprising, that 80% of venture capitalists were unable to return 3% per year. And for the rest of the 20%, the 10% that satisfied this criteria, those venture capital funds were before 1990s, the very first. So, venture capitals don't seem to be picking up the right news. And so if you are hoping that you're going to be invested by venture capitals, but that is a problem. But thinking from the other way, even if you are funded by the venture capital, there's no guarantee. And in fact, it doesn't show much evidence that your company or your region will be successful. And there are alternative methods of finance, and I've been talking with the successful Inc. company entrepreneurs, and the bootstrapping was mentioned so many times. And also in this year, we were conducting a survey on the Inc. companies, and we received a response of 479 of them. And the most common sources of finance was like personal savings, bank loans, credit cards, some support from families. And if you look at the venture capital, it's only 6.5%. And if you include the angel investors, like only 7.7% of the Inc. companies are financed by these entities. So it does suggest that these Inc. companies have accomplished millions of dollars of sales. They have scaled up to some level, and they were able to do it without these venture capital or angel sources. So there are many other ways to support the company. Elements to incubators and accelerators. And the evaluation of incubator is kind of complicated because you have to compare with the companies within the incubators and companies that didn't go through the incubators. And I have seen only 2 studies that have controlled these groups, and both of them concluded that the incubator companies tend to live longer during the incubation years, but live shorter years after the incubation years. Therefore, it's very likely that the incubators are prolonging the dying company. And the accelerator, okay, this town now has accelerator. That is going to make a difference. Well, not so quick yet. And accelerators tend to have different features from incubators. First, they have a very competitive application process. They often make a pre-seed investment with equity exchange, and they create a cohort of entrepreneurs. And they often focus on their teams rather than just single entrepreneurs. And they say that they connect to mentors. Those things sound fine, But I just want to caution that there has been no evaluation research yet. And just looking at the investment, like which accelerator attracted the investment, there seems to be like two huge outliers, Y Combinator and the Dexter's. And just very standard in statistics. If outliers are driving the data, don't argue that those things, outliers are not the norm, so they don't really determine what it is like. And even with the Y Combinator and Dexter's, we actually don't know what happened to those companies that we invested. And lastly, university, especially the like a scientific research component of the university, how much the university is receiving the National Institute of Health or NSF funding, and how many patents they have created. And not too much is systemically studied yet, but I've been looking at the nanotechnology research, how much federal government distributed the research fund and how it came to the university or other sectors. And there has been very little connections between scientific discovery and after the university makes the research, whether it go. It's supposed to be commercialized, but there has been very little evidence. Some people say that it's very critical to have the strong technology transfer office. The basic idea is that the technology transfer office will be mitigating between entrepreneurs and the professors with the technologies. But what happens in reality is that basically in many universities, probably not all, but many universities, if the technology transfer office is group of lawyers who try to maximize revenue for the university, and the entrepreneurs want to deal with those people with the unguaranteed technology, and probably not. There has been some talk about the we have to have the entrepreneurship courses, especially the business schools, writing the business plan. But that's something in Japanese we call it the beautiful rice cake in picture. It's beautiful and nice, but you can't just eat it. You can plan many things, and you can look as if it is realistic and sound nice. But the more important thing is how you actually do it. And this part hasn't been taught much in many of the universities. And so I've been studying Kansas City, St. Louis, to some extent Milwaukee, Atlanta, and I work in New Mexico. And this seems to be the biggest problem of most ecosystems. And I'm actually making a quote from the impressionist that I heard from 2 years ago. And this is just quote happened to be about St. Louis, but this rhetoric applies to almost all places in the city that they're not known as entrepreneurship. It's something like this. Like even in the St. Louis 5 years ago, it was something like this. I do this business alone. Like if you talk to entrepreneurs, he will say, I do this business alone, and I don't know other startups in town. I don't know any investors here, and there's only old money and big corporations. So I go to Silicon Valley to find them. And if you actually talk to an investor, they will say that I don't find any startups here, and there's no startups here. So I go to Silicon Valley to find companies in that. So they just don't know each other. They might find each other in Silicon Valley if they are lucky, but they don't know in their own town. And that seems to be the biggest challenge. So I thought, conducting the research in St. Louis could inform us something. First, in this research, we try to focus on connections with specific attention on individuals and organizations. So it's not the connection of the, like the 6 elements of the diagram I was showing you. But it's, if you talk about this kind of knowing each other and connections, it's not the university knowing venture capital, or university knowing the finance, or university knowing the culture or policy. But it should be the connection between do entrepreneurs know, like supporting that kind of very concrete micro, individual organizational connection. And second, we were not paying much attention to like which elements can be included in the ecosystem, but we started with the most essential element in the ecosystem. Like, what is the most essential element in the entrepreneurship ecosystem? Entrepreneurs. Right. Yeah. Without that, like, there is no such thing as entrepreneurship. So start with them. And we started talking to them, asking about, what is your business? But, what kind of support have you? Like, who else did you interact? What kind of networks have you interacted? And also, we focus on the startup ecosystem. And, I was kind of talking about entrepreneurship ecosystem, which kind of has a long spectrum from the, very beginning of the startup of the company to the all the way to the, scale up of the company. But let's focus on that startup ecosystem because startups need more support from other people. And there will be more types and supportive connection with your company. And lastly, I think the case of St. Louis was informing to us because the in St. Louis it is the emerging startup ecosystem in the last few years or so. So rather than studying the old Silicon Valley, I think this case can provide a lot more implications to other. And St. Louis as a region, I don't need to lecture this to you at all. Kind of quite hard economically in the last almost 20 years, which led to the emergence of the Mosaic project, welcoming the immigrants, and let's see Holland right there. And also the promotion of entrepreneurship and innovation. And that led to the establishment of the Arch Grant in 2012. And as you know, Arch Grant provides small seed fund, or medium seed fund, of $50,000 to 15 or 20 companies. And the way we researched, we focused on the Arch Grant recipients of 2013 cohort. There were 20 of them, and we interviewed 16 of them. And just as talking about the emerging ecosystem, and I probably don't need to tell you much, you know almost all these organizations, but just looking at this is a selected list, but you can still see that many entrepreneurship support organizations emerged in the last 3 years or so.
Thank you, Yas. You gave me the most fun part to present. Very nice of him. So, as we talked to these entrepreneurs, we found several different levels of connections in the ecosystem. The first level is shown in this diagram, and that's between the entrepreneurs. Because we didn't get to interview all 20 of the entrepreneurs from the 2013 cohort of Arch Grant recipients, which was the main firms that we interviewed, or all of the firms that we interviewed, they are not all present in this diagram. But of the 16 that we talked to, 12 out of the 16, or 3/4, expressed active relationships with the other firms, and 4 did not express currently active relationships. Many of them expressed 4 or more, or at least 2 active relationships with other entrepreneurs of their cohort. So overall, this suggests that Arch Grants was successful in creating a recipient community where the firms are learning from each other and they're giving each other feedback about their businesses. This sense of a learning community was explicitly expressed in a few quotes that entrepreneurs gave us during the interviews. One here from IT Firm A says, "It's a great environment. I had some questions about some of the frameworks that they are using, and sometimes other people stop by and ask me things, such as, what do you think about this idea?" Further, the cross-industry ties, which are shown here, I'm sorry, I skipped this part. The blue are biotech firms, and the light blue are IT firms. And the size represents the number of ties going into that firm. So while you can see that there are quite a few ties within industries, there are also ties across industries, and being in a certain industry didn't restrict connections between these companies. This is shown very well in this quote from biotech firm B, who says, "You're doing completely different things. You're all building something, and that involves kind of the same thought process, I like to think. Different expertise, but definitely the same thought process." So after we laid out the level of entrepreneur to entrepreneur connections, we were brought up one level, which involves also the major support organizations of the community. Shown here in yellow are the new actors. You'll notice that the few firms from the last diagram that appeared isolated or by themselves are actually connected to the other firms through one and sometimes multiple support organizations. We saw that these firms or the organizations were providing many layers of support to these companies. And this is shown very well in this quote from other firm C. They said, the ARCH grants got us to ITEN, which got us to a business journal, which put us in touch with some of our client contacts and so forth. So as you can see, the connections between these support organizations aren't simply interpersonal connections where the members of one board know the members of another board. But if a firm goes through a program or receives support from one, it serves as validity for the others. We found in our interviews actually very specific information that the support organizations would exchange, such as what stage the companies were in, their strengths and weaknesses, and what they've done with those firms already, and what had worked and what hadn't. Finally, we get to our highest level of connections, which goes beyond the entrepreneurs and the support organizations and includes peripheral community actors, which may not be peripheral, but for our analysis, we didn't speak to them. These new actors are shown in green, and they can include community groups, other entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurship-related events. We only included in this diagram any third-level actors, which were mentioned by 2 or more firms. So there are many more even than this. We found many ties to the 2012 cohort of ARCH grant recipients. One of the 2013 firms, an IT firm, mentioned that there were 3 or 4 IT companies from 2012 that they talked to, and one of the manufacturing firms said that there were 2 founders from 2012 that informally mentored that company. We found several community-based events hosted by support organizations that we didn't talk to, such as BioSTL, BioSTL, Center for Emerging Technologies, and others. We also found several community events hosted by grassroots volunteers, such as Start Lewis, Code Until Dawn. I'm hoping and guessing many of you have already been to these, and Startup Weekend, 1 Million Cups. It's very neat to look at all of these different connections and how interrelated the community really is. So next, I'll pass it back to you guys.
And well, just one more point about the location. I was looking at the street address of the companies, and to me this was striking. Maybe it wasn't anything new for you. This map kind of shows kind of boring thing. Circle is the actual recipient and triangle is the subject, but white boring side kind of shows like one big concentration here, another big concentration here. And as you know, this was the old T-Rex location, where many of the companies are located and support organizations. And this is more like a biotech companies and the support organization. And if you go back to the very first like social network that Karen created, the ties between the companies, there actually seems to be a direct correlation between where the companies are located. Like, in the ones located in these places tend to have a much higher interaction with other companies. So moving on to summary findings. So it looks like ARCH grants have created cohorts of entrepreneurs, which promoted learning between entrepreneurs. And this strategic co-location of support organizations, so that around at the T-Rex and the 4041 Forest Park Avenue area, seem to help the startups companies to get integrated. to the local ecosystem. And just one note about the Scandal Center. It was highly involved in the startup ecosystem. But I would like to ask the question, like, is it because Ken Harrington, the exiting director, is good at teaching business plan writing? Not really, he didn't do that. Or is it because Scandal Center helped to license university technologies? Not really. But the role that Scandal Center played was by inspiring students and by offering platforms to discuss business ideas, like idea rounds, as you know, and by connecting students to local startup companies, sending the resumes, sending them as interns, and also in a business competition, invite local startup companies and judges. So it's the different roles that universities that previous studies haven't emphasized. And it seems that the connections between entrepreneurs are multifold. And in the past literature, people have pointed out that I think network is important. It's almost a cliche, and they have said that network is important to find business ideas, or to introduce new customers, or introduce an introduction to the investors. But there is a lot more to it. One thing was the psychological and moral support between entrepreneurs. It's in a way very lonely journey, very hard. But the entrepreneurs see what other entrepreneurs are doing, and just seeing each other will give them moral support. And the most important bit about the learning connections, and it's the learning not exactly from the professors or learning from the textbooks on how to start companies, but it's the practical knowledge about how to run business. There is just so many layers of knowledge to it, and the best sources of that knowledge seems to be learning from other entrepreneurs. And connections happen between individuals and organizations. So not really between the vague elements. So just injecting that element in your local ecosystem is unlikely to work. And the entrepreneurial events do connect entrepreneurs. And so some of these events are informal, kind of not exactly organizations, but just what we call events. So if you try to look at it as support organizations, they don't come in the radar. And past studies haven't really paid much attention, but these events seem to be connecting entrepreneurs quite effectively. And entrepreneurs receive, with the multiple layers of support, they do receive multiple supports from multiple organizations. And here's something a little bit tricky. So some degree of overlap at the local ecosystem is not necessarily bad. And indeed, this overlap may work well for various entrepreneurs. And this makes sense because there are some compatibility issues between entrepreneurs and support organizations. That depends on the specific segments of sectors, stages of businesses, like personalities of the entrepreneurs and personalities of the support organization people. And probably there are many other factors that we haven't really researched yet. And we just have to remember that the way to become successful is heterogeneous, and that's why entrepreneurs are innovative. So in this sense, no single organization in the given sector or state needs to dominate the support function and tell entrepreneurs how to be successful. However, this also means that the ecosystem requires very heavy coordination between support organizations, and the ecosystem requires constant readjustment between support organizations. Some thoughts for the next step by St. Louis, stating the next step for our research, and we will further research the St. Louis ecosystem with between the Cosmo Foundation and the Scandal Center. So further research about the Arch Grant recipients, expanding the research cohorts, and we will be re-interviewing the 2013 cohort to see the more longitudinal aspect of what's happening with their connections in the local area. And what there are different forms of networks and resources within ecosystem. So even within one local entrepreneurship or startup ecosystem, I'm suspecting that things are heterogeneous, between different sectors and other things. And we are fortunate that we will be having a collaboration with the Susan Clarkman team from University of North Carolina and Banu Muskazan from University of Massachusetts. They are right here in Virginia. So they'll be researching with us for the next year. And also, we plan to survey, we interview the companies, but we would like to conduct a survey to see a lot more in a larger scale and make the comparison between St. Louis and Kansas City and Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I really appreciate your cooperation on the survey to include a wider network of entrepreneurs. And the next step, just like any other areas, St. Louis probably needs the collaboration and adjustment by support organization. The question, how? I hope we can get to have some discussion in the next panel. And also, this isn't really entirely supported by research, but it's more like my gut feeling. But St. Louis is having a very good number of support organizations for the startup stage. And in the, as I mentioned before, in entrepreneurship is the kind of a continuum from startup and we're going to get to the scale up of the companies. And perhaps maybe St. Louis can think more about the mechanism to promote the scale up of the companies. And we would like to just talk about the two examples, pipeline and the hemp. And the pipeline program, some of you know, and I think St. Louis has, in a way, in a limited way, participated in this pipeline program organized in Kansas City, which Omaha Lincoln areas. And essentially, they take the applications from the decision makers of companies who have about $1 million sales, but would like to go to the next level. They create a cohort of entrepreneurs and connect to mentors and supporters. And the Johnny Club, I really like the Johnny Club's expression here. The purpose of the pipeline program is to create the lifelong connection among entrepreneurs. And I know there has been some discussion about expanding the St. Louis people into the pipeline program, but they can't expand it without with a free money. So I think it requires some kind of sponsorship. Another one, Hemp Healthsburg Entrepreneur Mentorship Program. So some people may know that Healthsburg Diamond Jewelry. So Barnett Healthsburg was the owner of the company, and he was successfully sold the company to Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, some years ago. And early years, he was mentored by Mr. Goldman, and he was, Barnett was telling to the Goldman that you have given me so much. How can I return? And Mr. Goldman said, you don't have to give it back to me. Just give it to other people. That's going to be the thing. So he started the mentorship program. And in a somewhat similar way, they take the application from entrepreneurs or running a business with about $1 million revenue, business in existence for more than 3 years. And they will take up to 20 mentees per year. And they will match with the mentors. So, Barnett has developed the extensive list of mentors in Kansas City, and they will try to connect. And they have various methods of making the connections, including something like speed dating, like 5 people sitting in one table, and just 20 minutes and bell rings and switch. So there is quite a bit of practical knowledge about it. But perhaps St. Louis may be able to create something for its own. Another one. So I have researched the ink companies in Kansas City, and with the cooperation of ITEN and the regional chamber, I've been trying to interview the ink companies in this area too. And there is a good number of high growth ink companies in this area, and so these are in a way experienced entrepreneurs, and they can teach a lot to the local startup entrepreneurs. in a way, these are somewhat random questions, random ideas about the next steps, but I'm pretty sure that the panel will talk more next. And at this moment, I'd like to take any questions, reactions about the research paper. And please, I think we can save your ideas for the next step of this for the next session. But any questions, comments?
Yeah, you mentioned at the very beginning that the term ecosystem is used, misused, and abused oftentimes. Do you think that sometimes using the framework of ecosystem is part of the challenge instead of, like, we're using a biological framework as opposed to using like a sociological framework like community, and looking at the elements of a community that make a successful entrepreneurial community versus ecosystem, which involves more of both the living and non-living elements of that network? Would be better suited if we really view this through the living relationships? Because a lot of the things that you mentioned, the mentoring, the access to relationships, and that type of thing, are all more of a community-based and a sociological, framework as opposed to a biologic framework.
Yeah, no, excellent point. I do agree. I do not exactly know where this ecosystem evolved, and in a way, it is rather broad term. But in a way, it describes well that there are so many different actors involved, and the way they are involved is in a very organic way, not like a central planned way. So in that sense, I think it describes some aspect of it, but at the same time, sometimes the vocabulary and concept works by its own and starts to be used by so many different ways. So in a way, it's a big challenge. If you or somebody can come up with a better terminology, I think it might lead to lessons.
Another question?
The apparent dismal performance of venture capital, particularly with the adjustment risk, would seem to almost suggest an inverse correlation between their participation and the success of the underlying venture. Is there an explanation?
It's hard to tell. So the one thing is within this venture capital world, it's extremely, skewed result. So there are a few of them extremely successful, and that's what the media talks about. Facebook, and people thinking, okay, can I use Facebook? So we have to note that there are some successful cases, but it's a really small number percentage. So in a way, I don't think we can really argue that the involvement by the venture capital will be the cause of the failure of companies. But in a way, it kind of really shows that it's just very hard to pick the winners in this world, in this market, in this time that we are living in. I think that's just the hard reality, and we just shouldn't assume that getting the investment from venture capital isn't the success factor or the end of it. It's only just one of the things that companies can get the support, but it doesn't necessarily mean the larger success that entrepreneurs should be taking.
Maybe one last one, then we'll bring our panel on.
Sure. I have a quick question for you. Thank you for the research that you presented. In the next scale of research that you're going to be looking at, are you guys going to be breaking out gender, looking at women entrepreneurs, and the rate of the uptake of women in all these different industries? Because in the St. Louis ecosystem, we cross various industries here, as well as not only gender, but minorities too as well.
Yes, you're right. Karen proposed the analyzing by the genders, and that's why we asked the collaboration by the Susan and the specialists in gender analysis.
Please join me in thanking Yas.
There's been a couple of questions that stood out to us. One of them is, if we think about moving from startup to scale up, what do we do there? And the other is, you guys had at the end of this presentation, we got lots of support And how do you sort of adjust, modify that support in a way that you don't have to address that, but I'm just saying those are questions that you will address at some point. It's a war.
Don't go beyond a minute, but.
That wasn't a softball I asked.
Ginger Oster, I'm the executive director of Arch Grants, and as you heard, we did $50,000 equity free grants to companies that are willing to headquarter in St. Louis. The fact that we're equity free and the fact that we ask for the commitment that they reside, they headquarter here, really differentiate us from other competitions locally and also nationally.
I'm Ken Harrington. I was the managing director here at WashU at the St. Louis Center. I'm now involved with the Bayberry Group and continuing to take a role in being involved with making sure the momentum continues to gain pace, not just stay where it is, which is what I'd like to see happen as I go on to my next step in life.
Hi, my name is Dr. Cheryl Watkins-Moore. I am leading the new initiative with BioSTL. It's the Bioscience and Entrepreneurial Inclusion Initiative for the St. Louis region. Our purpose is really being able to bring awareness and highlighting the networks for women and underserved minorities, that there are opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities in the bioscience sector in the St. Louis region.
My name is Jim Brasunas. I'm the executive director of ITEN. ITEN is an organization that focuses on tech entrepreneurs and building tech startup companies in the St. Louis region. Our motto is entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. So we do that in a number of ways, through mentors, through entrepreneurs in residence, and through our curriculum of programs that are geared for helping companies from concept stage through business model validation and to introduction to investors. Or if they choose the path of bootstrapping all the way, we also help them along that if they want to go without taking outside money.
So we're going to open the floor just a moment for questions. I'm Dedrick Carter, as you heard earlier. I'm the Executive Officer for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at Washington University, a new role that we've established that addresses many of the concerns that Yas spoke about in his paper. How does the Technology Transfer Office work? So we make sure it's a service organization that reports into the Post Office through the Skinwalder Center, our new Center for Research Innovation, and the Tortec portfolio. So I'm going to start off with not the softball question. The question that's going to seed everyone else to sort of ask is, St. Louis is an emerging ecosystem. And in that area, we've got great support, wonderful support, diverse support that help start businesses. How should that support change or be modified as we move into the scale-up mode?
So in that endeavor, I hope that all of us as support organizations, whatever role we play, that it continues to be an ecosystem and doesn't become an ego system. Because one of the situations that I see a lot of organizations head into, having been in the nonprofit space for a long time, is it becomes very competitive and we start to work on our relevance so that we're in a self-preservation mode versus really thinking as an entrepreneur would, which is, there's a problem, how do I solve it? And that many minds are better than one. And so really being intentional about the ways in which we come together as an ecosystem, as leaders within that ecosystem, and leaders often in name only. I'm the executive director. I'm not an entrepreneur. I am beholden to a board. Many of the nonprofit organizations run that same way. So the necessity for herd cats as we reach consensus to pivot quickly, just as we expect our entrepreneurs to pivot, that's going to be an essential component of how we go from starting to scale up, is to really make sure the lines of communication are open and that we're constantly communicating and being honest, not drinking our own Kool-Aid.
Ecosystem, that's a new term.
Yeah, I agree with what Ginger's saying, but I want to take it a little bit different direction. We were talking about the term ecosystem. And in a way, I think it's a useful model in terms of talking about the different components. But on the other hand, it seems to create a closed system in a way. You look at a chart that's got all the connections, but yet there's an end there where there are no connections. And I think that in terms of taking the region and along with a lot of companies to the next level. That concept of an ecosystem where you've got startups here and then kind of the rest of the culture and economy is over here, that has to start breaking down. And we need to start integrating in different ways, both up and down, larger corporations getting involved, and then on the other end, individuals, and making sure that individuals who are new to entrepreneurship can find their way in, even though they may not be starting a company. So to me, the next step of scaling is really almost breaking the bubble of the ecosystem and allowing it to flow in with the rest of the whole culture and economy. And hopefully it can have a very positive influence, because one of the factors that has held St. Louis back historically, and I've been talking to a few people about this today, is exactly what Ginger was saying, is this ego where we look at things as a zero-sum game. I had a real good friend of mine tell me the story of what happened with the proposed airport that was going to be in Illinois back during the Carter administration, and why that airport ended up being in Denver instead of St. Louis. And there are a lot of instances where folks here in this community have looked at things as a zero-sum game. So if you win, that means I lose. So I want to make sure that you don't win, and I'm going to kind of torpedo your project so you don't win, so I don't lose. And that's not the fact. That's not the case with the startup community right now. It really is, for all intents and purposes, a one for all for one spirit about it. And if we can keep that, and as we break the bubble of the ecosystem, that becomes, seeding the rest of the community, rather than this older mentality, starting to dominate the startup community, then I think we're talking about a lot more than just advancing some companies, but we're talking about changing the culture and the way people think about what it's like to be in St. Louis and what it means.
So, House rules, all questions are active until the end of the session. I want to keep that question active, but I just want to look to Cheryl and say, you brought up the issue to be concerned about diversity and full access to the community. Literally just got off the plane a few hours ago from San Francisco. One of the concerns we had as we were going out is thinking about, we're taking a group of folks out to represent St. Louis. How do we make sure that group is as representative as possible? It's not easy. So
No, it's not.
how do we, as we start to scale up, how do we make sure that we're not scaling up something that isn't sort of at the right, there you go.
Embracing. I think what's very interesting, because I'm pretty direct, as everybody knows. And when I heard about the Southwest flight going out, my first question was, how many women were on that flight and how many minorities were on that flight? Which I didn't ask the right person that. So you were on that flight. But I think what's very interesting, and that was the whole reason when we look at BioSTL, and I think what's very interesting, BioSTL was under another name, and it was very interesting when I saw your research, guys, that it showed that BioSTL was formed in 2011. Actually, BioSTL was under another name called the Plant and Life Science Coalition, which started 14 years ago. And they were one of the founding fathers, so to speak, of the bioscience industry and the startup ecosystem as we see it today. And it was a collaborative process. It was looking at how do we take a group of institutions, WashU, SLU, BJC, and the Plant and Life Science Coalition, and look at, since we had large manufacturing firms leaving, how do we create something that's going to be 14 years later what we see today? And that includes not only looking at infrastructure, seed funding, funding for businesses, and now the next step is how do we make it inclusive for everyone here in this industry to thrive? One of the things that I looked at this year in taking over the leadership of this program was, in order to have a thriving ecosystem where you're inviting everybody in, people have to understand what the networks and the resources are. So that was the focus of our programming this year, was raising awareness around, well, what is life science? What do you talk about when you talk about life science? Because most people think, I gotta be a scientist or an engineer or somebody to get into this segment. You don't. If you've got great professional skills, if you're a CFO, if you are an HR, you can start a business that supports startups here. And I think the biggest deficit that we had was not highlighting the resources and networks that are important. If you're going to start a business here in the St. Louis market, most of our male counterparts understand who Arch Angels are, who Arch Brands are, you know, who Capital Innovators are, if you're in this ecosystem. But if you're not part of this ecosystem, that's what we wanted to highlight. And in our first two events, that's what we did. We brought together all the pieces in the bioscience ecosystem, all of the players, from the university players, the funders, the community partnerships, which are key, as well as facility partnerships, and brought that to the folks that came to our meeting so that they're able to engage with a Billikens Angel. They're able to engage with someone from Scandalera. So you've got to be able to highlight that and bring it to the masses.
So, certainly, Ken, and I'll say, Kara made a comment that some of the notes out there that look like they were standing on their own were really connected to the support network. Like you're saying, is making sure that the support network is open and available for all. So, Ken, we've heard that, in the last 15 years, we've been able to develop a wonderful top 15 Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. And there was sort of the question of what's the special sauce. It's not business plan writing, but what are the, Scandalera hasn't done it on its own, right? What are the inputs in other parts of the university ecosystem that help you design this?
I think Ginger's comment about ego is important. This has got nothing to do with the support organizations or Scandalera or Jim or Ginger or I or Carol. The only thing that matters is having good entrepreneurs. And if you have a high velocity of these social connections, as talks about, and all these events are going on, and entrepreneurs with common interests can find each other and connect, you get tons of free work and lots of fast pace. And that's what St. Louis has done that's different, in my mind, than other regions that are economic development focused. The entrepreneurial relationships that the support organizations cause, and we need to be subservient to these entrepreneurs, we need to listen to them. If they've got a crazy idea, we have the capacity to support and help them meet people and advance that idea. The market will decide. The market's deciding right now how we scale. And as long as the mojo is there, which is created by the entrepreneurs, the market's going to decide, and the market's going to coordinate. I mean, we're going to see tons of changes. And that's a good thing because the momentum is good. But the key is entrepreneur development, not venture selection. The more good entrepreneurs you have, and the more the velocity of their relationships change, the more people will be saying things like the German seed company says, we're going there because it feels good. This feel is what's attracting people. It's what's starting to get more of our WashU students to say, hey, something's a pretty cool place. And so the entrepreneurs, if we're attracting people because of how it feels, and we've got increased momentum on that, everything will take care of itself. Capital is coming to town. Capital is going to come from successes. Talent's going to come from successes. These things take 30 years, 40 years. And the only way they sustain is through success of entrepreneurs and ventures.
It'll take 30 or 40 years. I'm glad that Cheryl reset the clock back. So here's a question for the group. In Mayor Slay's opening letter in the report, it talks about St. Louis having some elements that could be a model for other places. I'd ask each of you, what of St. Louis do you think you would offer us as potentially a model? It's dangerous to offer things, but potentially a model for other emerging
Well, I think, what my take is, what Jim did and what DMS did back at the beginning and different things was, and what Yaz's report points out is entrepreneurs didn't know each other. And what Jim did, I think you said you got your ITEN group together because all of a sudden you noticed there was a lot of more tech ventures in PMS and you've been involved with tech before. And you basically said, I told them I'd buy them beer and pizza, come on down. How many did you get?
There were about 30, yeah.
And how many of them knew each other?
Almost none. And they didn't know that the other ones existed.
Now Jim's working on a thing called special interest groups. How many other pockets of entrepreneurial interest are out there that we can cause meaningful connections, cause momentum to the game? So I go back to the advice I'd say is stop talking about a strategy study, give some beer and pizza and get people to get common interest. You can log be working, you'll save a lot of money.
Working like a true engineer. I love that because, Phyllis is in the audience and Dennis at Cortex loves to talk about spontaneous, collisions that happen, just increasing the spontaneous collisions. Others?
It's funny, I just met a VC that came to town. Actually, we were encouraged to meet through a network that I'm familiar with. And she's from the West Coast, from the Bay Area and from San Diego. And this was her first time in St. Louis. And she said she came here just to see what was going on here. And she went to the Ag Innovation Showcase. She's had an opportunity to talk to folks around here. And she was amazed at all of the activity and what was going on in the region. And I think what she was amazed at is the level of collaboration that goes on in this region. And it's not about, I'm going to protect my turf and I'm not going to talk to you, from one organization to another, as well as with entrepreneurs. And her statement back to me is, I'm coming back to St. Louis to look at opportunities here. And St. Louis, as everybody knows, from a VC perspective, used to be known as the flyover region. And right now, we're being courted by institutions that are coming here because of the activity here. So when we talk about what would I look at, I would say it's the collaboration between not only the entrepreneurs, but between the organizations and the value that they bring. The collision points are very important when we talk about innovation and looking at new technologies.
Yeah, I would say, what do you want to offer up to other regions? I would agree with Cheryl 100%. The first thing, if we could offer it, is the sense of collaboration and this all for one for all spirit that's inclusive of all, and hopefully all races, genders, and everything. But we really are looking out for each other. But then stepping one step back, I would say, okay, but then what have we done that's really unique here in St. Louis? And I think Ginger and what Arch Grants is doing certainly is in that category. I know it's being replicated already in Kansas City and probably some other places as well. Yeah. So, and the other, I'd have to say, is ITEN. I mean, we've looked long and far to find, there's some words out there: incubator, accelerator, meetup group, this and that. None of them really apply when people ask, okay, so what is ITEN? I can do a 15-second, but then from there it's got to be a 5-minute discussion, because yeah, we do all these pieces of that, but there's something else as well that we do that we haven't seen anywhere else. So I might as well toot my own horn, but I think with our team, ITEN is pretty unique. And Arch Grants, and it's interesting, we're both nonprofits as well. And I think that's another element that you don't find. I'm no expert on other regions. I know there are some nonprofits that are very active in Silicon Valley, but we do seem to have a really good mix and working relationship between the for-profit and non-for-profit sides of things, and also the institutions, the universities. So, this ability for all of us to play in the same sandbox and not throw sand in each other's eyes, I think it's something that is really at the core of if we have something to offer, that's what it is, but it's an intangible.
Questions coming to you next, but I want to set this up for you. Same question. I was at a conference not too long ago, with some college, a longtime colleague, and we were talking about a company, and I realized as we were talking that he was talking about a company that had a WashU student. And I said, oh, that's a WashU company. And he said, no, this company formed on the campus of Berkeley. There were 3 students. One of them was WashU, one from Berkeley, and one from, I can't remember where the other place was. And they tried to figure out where they were going to start their company, and they realized that they should start in St. Louis because there was this great thing, Arts Fest. And I said, no, it's not. I said, so, and I started laughing. And he said, what's so funny? I said, there's a company that could have started in Silicon Valley and started in St. Louis, and it's pissing you off.
Nice, right? Well, yeah. How does that happen? Because even within our competition, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, no one would have thought that our competition in flyover country would attract applicants, let alone the winners of the competition, from Boston and San Francisco. And this year we did. And we have the privilege of having a captive audience because of what Washington University and SLU, to an extent as well, have been able to do relative to celebrating entrepreneurship in multiple disciplines, so that we benefit from the captive audience that the college students make in St. Louis. And for the folks looking at us from outside the state, that's a captive future employment pool. So it goes both ways, because we have the privilege of being a college town. And Arts Grants was largely founded to retain the talent who graduated here, but then to strategically attract talent that can be added into this market given our strengths. And those, recruits into the state, into St. Louis for our program, see the quality of the graduates we have each year as future employees. And that's truly a tremendous gift that we have that a lot of others do not necessarily have.
Yes.
Hi. I want to start by saying every single one of you have been supporters and helped me along the way, and I've had a lot of support from this ecosystem. But I want to say that I think the startup competitions have not maybe, they're missing an opportunity to have a bigger impact on more people. And what I mean by that is I've been a bridesmaid so many times, I should star in 27 dresses. But what I'm disappointed in, not that I don't win, but I'm disappointed I don't get the valuable feedback to help me improve. The feedback, and I can say almost universally, is almost non-existent, and some of the feedback shows that judges didn't even read the business plan. So I gotta say, I think you can impact the growth of more startups if you give valuable, insightful feedback other than just the winners.
I want to repeat that statement. You can impact the growth of more startups if you give valuable, insightful feedback. I came to WashU from Chief of Staff of the National Science Foundation. And one of the things we always focused on, particularly in the early stages, is making sure that valuable feedback is given as detailed as we possibly could, because that sets the stage for the rest of someone's career, entrepreneurial career. So I just wanted to interject that.
Well, and I think also you need to keep those alumni networks together of the winners, so the community continues to support each other in that way. But I couldn't agree with you more about how important feedback is. It's not about picking the winner of the venture. It's about developing the entrepreneur. It's not about the PR you're going to get. It's about how much better does that make the entrepreneur. And you cannot do that without feedback and workshops and alumni networks. That's why a pipeline is so important. And WashU is going to continue to support pipelines. You'll hear more about that. But that's why that is so important. It's entrepreneurial.
But I want to stress, I wouldn't even be where I am if it wasn't for this ecosystem.
So we got that, and there's room for improvement. That's what we're taking away. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, it's a great point, Anna, and, ITEN, we've gone out of our way not to pick winners. We're not a competition. We probably, if you meet our criteria for the kind of company you are, you're invited into ITEN and given access to our resources. And then you rise and fall based on your ability to learn from the resources that we offer. So we're all about creating the best startups that we can. And I agree to a large extent with what you're saying about the competitions. They get a lot of press. There's money involved. There's money being given away. But it'd be an interesting research study to follow competition winners and to see if they have any correlation with who becomes Inc. 5000 companies.
Exactly.
Even winning patient.
Thank you. Great discussion so far. A lot of exciting things happening in the startup scene in St. Louis. You talked a little bit about how do you, as you scale up, how do we continue to ensure that we grow? And one of the really important parts of that is bringing more money into these startups. I know everybody struggles to try to find additional capital to invest. Jim, I like what you said about breaking the bubble and making sure that you're getting out into the community more. And Ken, I agree completely with what you said. If you've got great ideas in the hands of great entrepreneurs, then capital comes in from the outside. But I'm just wondering, is any of the panel seeing any signs that additional angel money is coming in? There's a lot of people that probably could be qualified investors, angel investors. Are we reaching them? Are these messages getting to them? Are you seeing any signs of that?
I'm seeing evidence.
Definitely. And, I met with some folks this week that Parkway West graduate, and I know he was meeting a lot of people around there. And, don't know if it's gonna happen or how real the deal is, but talking about 10 million, I started a fund here. The iSelect thing that Jim and Francis, if that goes, and Jim and I are both involved with it, I mean, that could be a huge source of capital for funding ventures. But the ultimate success or sustainability, in my mind, is going to come from new wealth from successful entrepreneurs. And they provide wealth and knowledge and spin-off capital. That's what really keeps the momentum going.
So I think I want to comment. That's my business partner. You didn't even say you agree with me. But anyway.
Everybody knows that I agree with you.
So whatever. But I think what's interesting is that BioSCL is working diligently on developing a plan to bring more, especially because we know there's a hole, especially in the bioscience segment where funding is critical for a lot of device and pharma startups. And there's a hole, you've got pre-seed, you've got seed, there's that mezzanine hole, and there's that Series A beyond hole. So there are plans in place, and I think they're actively working on partnerships, bringing those types of funding apparatus here into town. And I'm looking at, I know most of the women have heard about Prosper. Prosper is an angel network that just formed this year that's focusing on investment opportunities. And from the BioSCL Inclusion Network, we're looking at duplicating or forming a similar network of angel investors that would be interested in investing in minority-led ventures.
You're gonna have one thing, you're gonna go here.
So one of the observations I have is in line with all of this is sort of cautionary though, because to be a qualified investor requires education. And what I sometimes see relative to our situation is that folks who aren't really appropriate angel investors think that they are. And I am disappointed that the wealth advisors in town in mass, of whom we have many, aren't more attuned to what's happening in this ecosystem that we're talking about tonight, and aren't giving better advice or encouraging more people to get involved who should be qualified investors or not. And the other piece of the puzzle for me is the entrepreneurs themselves, of course, right? Being very entrepreneur-centric. They need to understand how to become sensitive to investors. So what we as an ecosystem can do better from startup to scale up is teach our entrepreneurs how to be better managers of investor relations, and where they are struggling, we have a definite opportunity to improve how they feel in terms of how they engage with investors.
Now we're going to hear and then.
So I've done a lot of it. I've worked with Missouri S&T and my document to get S&T included in the community. So I've got one question for Derek and one for the audience. Derek, in starting I-Corps, I think you did something that to what Ken said about developing entrepreneurs is absolutely the best program I've ever seen, which is to get professors, grad students together with mentors to a very intensive program that changes the way they think about their research and changes the way they think about everything. So the question for you is, how are you going to get it? I think there's only been one I-Corps for the state of Missouri so far. And how are you going to get that program into this? And then the second question is, you know, we're down in Raleigh at S&T, although I live in Suffolk Valley. We're down at S&T, and we've got a lot of talent, including potential entrepreneurial talent, certainly a lot of technical talent. How do we get plugged into this community?
Well, I've got a simple answer for how do we get more. I'm going to get some beer and pizza.
Let me get the grad students.
That's the key. It really is. And mostly in this, it is the student that's saying, you know, it's like your son or daughter coming to you saying, hey, mom, dad, I said this in the bioentrepreneurship course yesterday. Whatever it was Sunday before I flew. And someone said, so how do we change my professor's mind? I said, I can't. I can go up to them with background and say whatever, but it's going to be mom or dad, your son or daughter that says, there's something here. I've been working with you for 5 years or 6 years or whatever the number is. Let's do this. And you're going to have a better chance of changing than I ever will.
We love Raleigh. We love Raleigh, and you know, we have a company that we funded Lunate.
Yep.
The name of it, right? And so they have a
Just in the
satellite
process of
office.
making investment.
Thank you. Bless you. They are my students.
I've got another idea. Let's find all the entrepreneurs that like to fly fish and let's take them down to the current river.
Increasing interaction.
Increasing and the entrepreneur centric. So one of the pieces for me, and Lumate's a great example, is, you know, they needed the programming talent. They were a product of that institution. They took it upon themselves to go to their alma mater and say, we need a satellite office because we need talent and they need income. And they don't have to move to St. Louis, but we can bring the work to them and we can just basically have this pipeline. And that is absolutely what I'd love to see. But I would love to see some hub of that in the, from the arch to the park sort of corridor that so astutely put on the map, and see some you know, like tech hub there of that talent. Because we see it when we have hackathons and these one-offs that happen. But where is that talent pool constantly being reinvigorated through the institutional higher in the state?
Yeah, we're trying to get a T-Rex, we're trying to get support for one of the T-Rex.
We've got 3 in the queue, 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to you. And then you'll probably be the last question for that.
Okay, so I'd like to follow up on what Jim said about creating the ecosystem bubble and following up on Joe's comment about getting more angel investors. One of the startups out of Washington University, Professor Efimov's cardio, they started off with funding from Arch Angels, but they also got funding from Centennial Angels of Columbia and from Twin City Angels up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That was all very good. Problem is the headquarters are now in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So it's a danger, but there is funding available if you broaden your horizons. And you know, angel investors in other parts, in Kansas City, Chicago, et cetera. You know, Chicago is big in the funding of Divergence, which was acquired by Santa. So I'd say keep your horizons broad.
As a faculty at local community college and very aware of diversity, one diversity element that gets left out is socioeconomic diversity. Mm-hmm. And you know, not all big ideas are good ideas. Many of them start out as little ideas. Last spring I started an innovation club at the college, and it's really beginning to take off. And I believe that part of the mission, as a faculty, okay, I teach about innovation, and it's a lot about creating and cultivating a mindset and an awareness, because we don't know where the next entrepreneur is going to come from. So we talk about pipelines, ecosystems. if we can, and a lot about bringing in people to attend WashU and stay here. What about the people that are already here? You know, I mean, we have a lot of good things that I'm just totally jazzed about here in St. Louis, and it's really exciting. And so, you know, along the cardinal way, we grow our own, right? So what can be done to continue to facilitate, to reach in? I'm working really hard to be intentional about connecting with local companies and building in that pipeline. But, you know, there's a lot of people inside companies that can be entrepreneurs too. So
if I summarize this question, it seems like my 10-month-old daughter one day is going to come to me and say, Daddy, where do entrepreneurs come from?
I think what you're doing is exactly the right thing. If you look at what I did and what Jim does and what different people in the support system do, they are basically champions for a particular interest area. You have visibility into that interest area. If you start connecting those entrepreneurs and you do the active thing you are, which is to come to things like this, to connect and form relationships with other people, it'll happen. But that pocket is going to grow around your instincts and protection of those entrepreneurs and introducing it to others so that that network just blossoms. And then the market will decide who's got a good idea, who can implement, who can execute. So I think you're doing the right thing. I applaud you for getting in. The same thing with Raul. You know, I think 5 years ago you'd be saying, don't let him go to St. Louis. You know, we got to keep him here. Don't let him go to St. Louis.
Still saying that.
So I'm going to borrow 5 minutes for you. I'm going to clear my queue. We got one over here, and then the final question there. The panel, we will be around to answer other questions. I'm taking away from your reception.
Paul's food's good.
That's what a beer and pizza is.
Spontaneous tuition, so over here.
First, please forgive me because everybody's asked so many great questions. I've got so many things in my mind. I'm a transplant from another area. I came up here not because of our trans, although I was a semi-finalist. I came up here because of the community and because ITEN welcomed me. And what I've noticed too is that I didn't get much feedback early on, and I struggled to find my way. And I think there's a happy place somewhere in the middle where an entrepreneur has to be able to be willing to change direction, but not go too far off the path. And what I'm asking is how we can grow not just the leadership of the entrepreneur community, but also the other entrepreneurs to be more willing and able and interested in guiding those that are coming from elsewhere or those that are right here in the community, to help them understand why they're on the wrong path. I got a lot of investment from somebody else after I got turned down for our trans, but our trans was right. I wasn't on the right path. I needed more guidance, and I couldn't get it elsewhere. It needs to be here in St. Louis. But how do we get all the entrepreneurs and the leadership communicating more? I know ITEN's doing a great job because that's how I found out I was on the wrong path. But
I really think it's just what you talked about. It's the collaboration effort that goes on. Jim and I right now are trying to understand how do we collaborate with our organizations because they're looking at creating an inclusion effort. And it was like, well, why are you doing that? And we're doing it too. That's kind of stupid. So let's look at how do we collaborate to make this an effective effort. And with bioscience crosses a myriad of industries. So it's not just, okay, you have to be in the science side. There are a lot of companies that are IT focused. There are a lot of companies that are on the ag side, different focuses. So I believe, and I always tell people, if you're, as an entrepreneur, because I'm an entrepreneur myself, if you are not networking, you're not working. So you need to come out to these different events. I think that folks need to understand, you know, even if it's not in my industry, so to speak, you might meet somebody that gives you great advice that can take your business forward. And you might not have ever had that opportunity to meet them if you don't come out and actually get involved in the community overall.
Junior has one thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You go.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it. So the hackathons that I've had the privilege of watching this year have been, great fun to hear about and see what happens out of them. But I actually would love to see us do some pitch-a-thons and have pitch-a-thons that folks can sign up for. And it's not necessarily for cash, but it's for the feedback that folks are so desperately in need of, right? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Of doors, great. So then now I can do it, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm
Yeah,
open
that's
to
great.
pitch-a-thons.
There's been a lot of really
So,
good
it's
things.
like idea bounce, but to do the pitch-a-thons where it's an intense period. Those hackathons are overnight. We'll figure out a time to do it, but it's long. And do it in collaboration with different players in the space if you've got the expertise from all different sectors, and make it fun. Because the other piece of this puzzle is when the fun is gone, and I see it when we have folks come through the competition, it's very hard to get people to connect. Because at the end of the day, whether your idea sinks or fails, you still may make connections if the relationship stuff is happening in the room. And so the fun piece, the beer and pizza piece, definitely is additive. So I'll report back on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit in connection with what's been said and what you were saying is that, we're talking about an all for one, one for all ecosystem and how we're collaborating and all this wonderful stuff. The other part of it is that we have to also include the fact that most startups are not going to make it. And there's this concept of failing fast, a concept of tough love, and this all has to be part of it. We struggle with this every day at ITEN because we see a lot of companies, and we work with a lot of companies, and it's very difficult, especially when sometimes you see a really good team. People who have been successful in a professional career and whatnot, and there's 2 or 3 of them together, and they're starting a new company. We had one of our EIR struggle with this, but yet that they're on the wrong path, and they need to be told. And if we don't tell them, probably nobody will. And we can't just. The easy thing to do is say, "Yeah, you're great. Keep doing what you're doing." But if you decide as in a position where you are a mentor, advisor, whatever it is to a company, it's your obligation and duty to say, hey, you know what, that's not going to work. You need to relook at this because it's not, and we've got tools that help that, the business model canvas and whatnot that we use. But I think the other side of the fact that the ecosystem is really, it's a wonderful place, is the fact that, there's a lot of death and dying going on. And we've got to also embrace that side of it because, dying fighting and with honor prepares you for the next round, the next incarnation, which you will be better and much more able to. At least you won't make the same mistakes a second time, probably.
And as you learn from each other, the whole entrepreneurial IQ for the community goes up.
Right.
Keep that pace going. By hustling, going to the things, networking, doing all that stuff, and keep telling us what we need to do better to help you be a better entrepreneur.
All right, so this is going to be a brutal time. I'm going to give you a question. We're going to take 1 or 2, and then send that 30 seconds.
Final round.
I mean, this team questions out here. But we're going to take 1 more, and then give you guys the last.
Maybe like a dance
I'm
master. So
done.
if you talk too long,
Done.
if you talk too long, you're
Off the
out.
ice.
All right, sorry to hold everybody up, but my name is Connor Wolk. I think it's pretty funny that this happened because I'm actually a current student at Missouri S&T, and I'm actually on entrepreneur grants to be here right now and not be at the school this semester. So I think it's really awesome that our company is a byproduct of the support community that's going on here in St. Louis. So I'm really, really proud to say that. But my question, I feel like I'm getting this more and more everywhere I go, but us as a community, as entrepreneurs, what can we do to help each other? Because I think it's great that there's a great ecosystem of accelerators and things like that. But what can we do to help each other from your kind of outsider's experience, from kind of that above level? What can we do?
Help other entrepreneurs that are below you, and work with entrepreneurs you can learn from that are above.
Absolutely. Be honest with each other. When something sucks, tell each other it sucks.
Listen. Listen well.
We're going to start down with Jim. 30 seconds.
What am I supposed to say?
What are we talking
20 years.
I would like to recognize the team that I am privileged to work with on a daily basis. Francis Chemelier, please stand up, Francis. Mike Gaddis, one of our new EIRs. His dance card is not full yet, so Mike's the guy. And are any of our other EIRs here? We've got 6 of them now, and I'm just so proud of what these folks are giving, and it's making ITEN what it is. And then, of course, our sponsors. MTC, Kaufman Foundation, wouldn't be able to do it without them. St. Louis Economic Development Partnership.
Thank you, Jim.
I'd like to thank everybody, but I don't want to leave anybody out. But I really want to go back to Yas. When you talked about, I think one of the things that's really missing, and I think you're going to pick it up, is how do entrepreneurs connect with corporations? I think corporations are missing, from a development standpoint, a lot of innovation that they could take in-house and not have to create on their own. And there's a lot of innovation in the city. How do we get large companies to actually embrace this and look at our entrepreneurial community as a business development opportunity? I'm shutting up.
For his research and things. I want to thank a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've known for a while that are doing great things in town. My big ask, I guess, is make sure you meet at least 2 new people that have got common interests at the cocktail party, and make sure you support this strong new WashU team that's coming in to integrate them. We got some new members in the community, and Dedrick is network working, I'll tell you that. But Emery Toker and the whole team and the team that they'll bring in behind them, support them, get them engaged, quickly, keep that doorway open to the community.
All right. You didn't have to cut them off.
If you have been a judge for Arch Grants, if you have applied for Arch Grants, if you have gone through our program, if you are a donor to Arch Grants, stand up. Yeah. Thank you. What we're able to do is in large part because a lot of people believe in the phrase of movement. And I am the steward of that money and that human capital, and I can't thank you enough. And God willing, we're going to make a huge difference in how the state approaches economic development by leveraging philanthropy and entrepreneurship. And it's a privilege to be a part of it. And we're so thrilled to have Karen and Yas and the Kaufman Foundation and Scandalaris take care of us in celebrating this story. So thank you.
I have a dispute with one part of Yaz's report. He said no cocktail parties, but I think we do have a cocktail party.